And now, your hosts of the Card Subject to Change podcast, for frequency's sake tag team champions of the world, the Wizard CZ, and never wrong, Nick Bull.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of the Card Subject to Change podcast, the podcast by the fan for the fan. We are powered by Lopez Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, and colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo. I am joined by my co-host, my co-tag champ of the podcasting network, the Wizard CZ. Wiz, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Nick. How about yourself?
Hey, not too bad. Before we welcome our guests, I just want to give a quick shout out to Absolute Pro Wrestling out of Waterloo. Put on a show in Well, they're not out of Waterloo. They were in Waterloo last night. Put on a show in Waterloo, and CZ and I took the 2-hour drive up and took in the show and want to thank them for putting on a classic show, a great show, and also thank them for the interactions afterward. We had a good time up there, didn't we, CZ? Absolutely,
and I love a good battle royal. That was the main event. That was a lot of fun to watch.
It absolutely was. Some twists and turns. They booked it pretty good. A lot of people left upset, but that's pro wrestling. Fans leaving either happy or upset, and they were definitely up in arms last night. But good job. I want to send a shout out to Jason Prentice and Brandon the Shank Eubanks for being welcoming us with open arms up there at the Cedar Valley Sports Complex in downtown Waterloo. Beautiful complex. You ever get a chance to see a show in that building, go for it. Great venue for wrestling. But that's enough about yesterday. A fun-filled day of wrestling for sure for the Card Subject to Change crew. We're talking about right now. We're going to get ripped. Not that way. Nope. No alcohol involved here. We're not going to get ripped that way. We're going to get ripped in a better way. We've got the one and the only Ripped Studwell joining us here on the Card Subject to Change podcast. Ripped, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. This is going to be a very fun time. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to this one too. Due to circumstances we'll probably touch on later. We had you booked a long time ago and things just didn't work out. But now we got you back on the show and got you right where we want you to fire away some questions at Mr. Rip Studwell. And Rip, I'm going to start off the show like I do every other show. Spoiler alert, if you watch this show, we started off the same way every time. I'm going to ask you, Rip, what is it about pro wrestling that got you hooked? What keeps you coming back? What about pro wrestling is it you love so much?
It's definitely the storytelling. I'm a huge fan of stories and just interesting characters and stuff like that. And especially back when I first started, which was WrestleMania X7 was the first one that I had ever seen, which is a great one to start out with because it's the consensus. It's a lot of people's consensus favorite WrestleMania.
It's amazing, yeah.
But yeah, like when you start out the show with William Regal drinking the tea that Chris Jericho pissed in. That is a great way to start your wrestling journey. And I was hooked from there. I love the match that they did too. It was great. It was not a long match. It was like 5 minutes, but there was just so much good stuff on that. Shane McMahon versus Vince McMahon was fantastic. Rock and Steve Austin, excuse me. That was phenomenal too. The TLC. I can't forget about that one. It was just, there's so many different flavors and that's what makes it so great, right? Like there's so much, the TLC is just this high flying extreme extravaganza. Then you have the comedy of Chris Jericho and Regal and this huge story of the main events. It's so good. I love the stories of it. And that's what keeps me coming back. Cause I love reading. I love anything that has a good story and a good heartbeat. It's so fun. That's what keeps me coming back for sure.
So it's safe to say.
Spoiler alert.
Oh, go ahead.
Spoiler alert. We're doing a lot of WrestleMania prep. We've got a lot of build up for the big event. WrestleMania X7 may or may not be on our list of the 8 best WrestleManias. I'm not going to confirm whether it is or not. Stay tuned for that.
Right.
Ripped, I want to know who you gravitated towards when you first started watching wrestling. Who are some of your favorites?
Rey Mysterio was 100% my favorite growing up. He was just, I've always been the small guy too. I never achieved great heights in that way. I'm just 5'6", and just watching Rey Mysterio be able to do it, it's inspiring as a kid. And that's why, I feel like when you get older, you start to shy away from those more superhero type characters, but they're 100% important in that way because Rey Mysterio was the first one that I gravitated towards. He was just awesome. You know, he came out shooting out from the entrance ramp and the fireworks going off. And of course, he couldn't do that later in his career. But yeah, he was definitely the first one. I just loved watching him. Anytime him and Eddie were in the ring together, I mean, that was just otherworldly watching those two wrestle. So I would say he was the first one for sure that comes to mind. But then as I got older, Chris Jericho, Edge, CM Punk much later, I very much enjoyed these guys because they were very, very good villains and very realistic characters that I enjoyed. So yeah, there's a ton of wrestlers I love, but for starting out, those would be the ones for sure that come to mind.
Ripped, I like how you mentioned that Rey Mysterio is a superhero. I believe in his Hall of Fame speech, he thanked everybody for allowing him to be a superhero.
Oh, yeah.
And Chris Jericho is a name that gets thrown around, a guy who has transformed himself over time. But look at Rey Mysterio and his career arc, a guy who's small, who did all the lucha stuff early because he was young and not as injured.
Yeah.
That guy really has transformed himself multiple times again and again over his career. And looking back on last year's WrestleMania, loved the match with Dominic. Loved that whole story, all the moving parts of that match and the story leading up. I thought they did a great job. You want to talk about? I enjoy a good storyline too, and I thought that was an excellent storyline and story arc last year.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, my light went out. Give me a second.
No, no problem, man.
No problem.
We're joined by Rip Studwell here on the Card Subject to Change podcast, powered by Low Pies Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, and colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo, talking storyline arcs and how Rey Mysterio and Dom really put the icing on the cake at last year's Mania.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was the original high flyer. I think a lot of people say that in wrestling. Like he invented it and just put it on the map. And I mean, you go back and watch his early stuff when his knees were not completely shot, essentially. Right. Dude, he was just ridiculous. And there's one spot in the Rey versus Kurt Angle match at SummerSlam 02, which is one of the best matches of all time. It's the best opening match of all time, if I had to put my name in that ringer there. But that spot where he's about to jump out of the ring, but the ref comes over and he's like, no, don't. And then Rey goes back, and then he goes to Kurt Angle. He's like through the middle rope, and then he just flies over. Oh my God, it just looks so crisp. He's so good. It's amazing.
You know, Ripped, you mentioned Rey and Eddie when they're in the ring together. I got to give a shout out to Halloween Havoc 97, one of my all-time favorite matches, no matter who it is. Rey and Eddie just knocked it out of the park way back then.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I know it's not everybody's favorite, but I still think my favorite, now that we're talking about Dominic, is the one at SummerSlam between Rey and Eddie for the custody of Dominic. That story was enrapturing to me when I was a kid. I just loved it. I hated Eddie. Like, he did such a good job. Yes. Normally, I could see like the in-between of it where I was like, oh, this guy's doing a good job. Like, I could always see that. Like, the villain's really good at what he was doing. But like, man, I just hated him. He did such a good job. Like, he was even better than most heels. And the payoff was so good. And just now to see Dominic doing what he's doing too, it's just really cool. Because it's like, in a way, it's like you grew up with Dominic Mysterio. Now he's on your TV, and it's just so cool. I love it.
For sure.
Eddie did such a great job as the villain in that role. And then you think of the chubby-cheeked Dominic, wondering who his daddy really was. And then you see him now just out there doing his own thing, shedding his own skin and just being his own character. Dude, he is so much fun to watch. I love watching Dominic.
Yeah, fantastic.
So, Ripped, if you could look back, what was the crystallizing moment in your life that said, made you say, I want to do this myself? What brought you into becoming a wrestler yourself here?
It was CM Punk shoot promo leading up to Money in the Bank 2011, I want to say.
Yep, you're right.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, just something clicked that day. I was like, this is the best thing. I was dealing with, my stepdad dealing with cancer and stuff like that at that time. And just to have that out and just to be able to not have to, I guess, dwell on that was just very cool. It was the first thing that made me feel anything when that was happening. Like, I was in a tough spot at that point. I mean, I was, 15, 14, 16, something like that when this was happening. So I was still a kid and I just didn't have any like outlet. I didn't know how to talk about this horrible thing happening to my stepdad, and just to be able to completely be lost in something like that. Cause I'd fallen out of wrestling for a little bit. And around this time was when I came back. It was during like the Shield stuff and Daniel Bryan and the Yes Movement and stuff like that. And CM Punk shoot promo. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Just something clicked that day when I was watching it for sure.
Talk about how wrestling, you shared there a little bit, but just how great wrestling is as an escape.
Mm-hmm.
I always call wrestling the great uniter because it brings in so many different walks of people of life. You go to a wrestling show and you're going to see a whole cornucopia of different people, ages, races, pay grades, all that type of stuff. It's the great uniter, but it's also a great place to lose yourself and find something to follow and tune in and appointment viewing and look forward to that. You touched on that a little bit, but just talk about that a little bit more about how important that was to you, not just dealing with that, but like throughout your whole life.
Oh, it was everything. Honestly, it was everything because it sounds dramatic, but like, I don't know if I'd even be here right now if it wasn't for stuff like wrestling. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's very hard to envision my life without wrestling making its mark because I've been open about it. I've dealt with mental health stuff for a long period of my life and, it still crops up every once in a while. But man, especially when my stepdad passed away from cancer, it was like the only thing that made me feel anything and like just made me feel anything other than just being sad and depressed. And like, I just didn't understand the world. And it was great. And that's always been my goal personally with wrestling. If I've been able to do that for anybody, just one person, I feel like I've done my job because that's what wrestling has meant to me. It's been a very important aspect to my life. And like my life would be fundamentally different if I did not watch the VHS of WrestleMania X7. I can tell you that.
Now it's come full circle. Now you are part of that environment where you are a wrestler. People come chant for you lately with the whole James Thomas thing, which we'll get into later. But now you go from being a fan, you're still a fan, by the way, but now you're part of it. What's it like being on the other side of it and seeing all those other people out there that are coming there to be entertained, coming there for an escape, and knowing that you help fill that void for some people?
It's hard to put into words, I think, but it's very strange to say the least that like people, as you said, are coming and like chanting my name and, just being overall into what I do, like that's always been something that's hard for me to like do what I give to the world valuable in any way. That's hard to quantify, but it's just, it's really cool. Like it's very cool to say the least. And it's just one of those random things where it's like my whole persona idea came from a sitcom I watched. And I'm like, just because I watched a sitcom episode, it's like now I'm at this moment in time where people are chanting my name and it's just like, it's flattering. And then for a guy like me, it's also quite strange because, a lot of my life has been telling myself, I don't matter or stuff like that. And it's just, well, apparently I do, you know what I mean? So
sure.
Yeah, it's cool. It's very flattering.